You are beautiful, and you are worthy of love and full acceptance as you are and as you are becoming. Hi, I'm Christian Nielsen. Welcome to the Path of Beauty. I'm coming to you from a trail at Lake Ann Park in Chanhassen near sunset. It has been a mostly gloomy day with rain on and off. And as we're approaching sunset, it's cleared off and become quite beautiful. So it is Pride Month. And to those who celebrate and allies, I say happy Pride. And I know there are people that do not celebrate Pride Month. As a person, a spiritual person, a person of faith, I have been very disturbed by the things that the church and the things people of faith have done historically to the LGBTQ community. It is wrong. You know, I've worked with many people in hospice at end of life, several people who are part of the LGBTQ community. And I have heard firsthand the lifetime of harm they have endured from communities that were supposed to love them and accept them, from families that are supposed to love them. I'm thinking of one gentleman in particular who our sessions were very long each week. And we wept through a lot of them together. The trauma and the hurt that this person had experienced was horrific. To make matters worse, this person had been able to go and make another life far away. They had community. They had friends. They had people who cared about them. But because of their terminal illness, because of several changes, they were forced to return to their hometown, which was a rural town in Minnesota. And there are a lot of loving, accepting, and beautiful people in rural places, so I do not want to reinforce stereotypes. But he came home, and at first he was fearful to come out, even though he'd lived most of his life out somewhere else. But he decided he had to do this. His family disowned him, kicked him out. His church refused to have a funeral for him. And I'll never forget at one point when he's telling me these things, and this was a long time ago, and realizing that I can't be associated with or part of any organization that could do this to people. I find a lot of beauty in Christianity and in the church. And I find that there's a lot of hypocrisy. There's a lot of hate that's often wrapped up in messages of love, which can become very troubling and very confusing, especially to kids. To be told that something is terribly wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. You know, so many people like to bring up the word sin. And as I've mentioned here before, sin is not what a lot of people think it is. The word sin comes from archery. And it literally is the word for missing the mark. Despite our best aims, our best intentions, sometimes we miss the mark. That's what sin is. It's nothing more than that. And this language is so often used to hurt people. But that in itself is sin. That is missing the mark. When you refuse to accept someone, when you bully them, when you won't give them equal opportunities, that is missing the mark. That is sin. And if you even want to believe that being an LGBTQ person is a sin, what about the sin of the deep harms that are perpetrated on the LGBTQ community, often in places where they are supposed to find love and acceptance? Measure those two. Sit with that. And I'm not interested in the old game of trading Bible verses because, this said that and that said this. And I will say a couple things. In Genesis, often people say, in Genesis it says that God made man and woman. That's true. But in Genesis it also says God made the day and the night. So are we supposed to think of everything in binaries then? People are saying that it's just man and woman and that's just the way it is. Well, what about day and night? As I'm looking at this beautiful sunset through the trees, what about sunset? What about those times when the day draws to a close and we see the oranges and the reds and the yellows and the full spectrum of light that comes through? Or one of my favorite times, I often go out to create content when it's so early. The sun isn't there yet, but there's this deep purple that starts to form out of the black and a deep blue, and gradually it lightens as the earth comes to life. Watching the sunrise over the water. These binaries aren't absolute. And just as there is a spectrum between night and day, there is a spectrum between male and female. Now, see, the Hebrew Bible is a literary device, and a lot of ancient literature would use these sort of binary comparisons, or they would use these couplets. And they weren't meant to say one or the other. They're saying both poles and everything in between. So if you think about the song Turn, 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 which comes from Ecclesiastes. And Ecclesiastes and the song says, a time to be born and a time to die. Well, I've worked with death for a very long time. And I've seen my son be born. I actually got to deliver him, which was the most terrifying experience of my life, but that is for another day. I've also had the honor of walking with other couples through childbirth, supporting them with music. And one thing I can say, sure, Sometimes death can be instant and sudden, but usually not. It's a process. There's a process that happens. And I think any woman much better than I can tell you that if they've given birth, that this is not something that just happens. It's a process. There's development and months of growth, and then the long process of labor. Again, these aren't binary things. Death and life aren't binary. Night and day aren't binary. And I'm sorry, you will never find me accepting that man and woman are binary, because they're not. See, and the other thing when you talk about sin, is sin, talking about missing the mark, often has to do with something people choose. The science is clear. I talked last time about listening. And if you listen, truly listen to non-binary people, to gay and lesbian people, to trans people, they knew they were different. Pretty much from their childhoods, they knew they were different. This isn't something that they chose. And you'll never convince me otherwise. So you may not want to go into the comments section if you're somebody who likes to argue these things, because I'm just not here to argue them. And I don't bother arguing about Bible verses anymore. Bible verses that came from very different cultural and historical contexts, with people who had a very different understanding of the world and of things like biology. And how many of you follow the laws of Leviticus? Honestly, come on. And you know what? I'm going to say this as gently as I can. Who cares? It doesn't matter. And I know I'm going to get some comments on this, and that's fine. It's your choice to do that. But in this era and our understandings, especially related to the different understandings that people of the time had, it just doesn't matter. But if you want to pick the other fight, then there's Sodom and Gomorrah. But Sodom and Gomorrah, if you understand the historical context, if you look at the translations, Sodom and Gomorrah and stories like it were about abuse. Were about failure to caring for the stranger or your neighbor and committing acts of abuse against them. Not being gay. And I'm sorry, but if that's what you believe, I believe you are mistaken. And you can tell, I hope you can tell I'm trying to be patient on this, because some of these arguments get to me a little bit. Then there's Romans. And don't even get me started about Paul or the many books that were written claiming, the letters that were written claiming to be Paul that weren't him. Bear in mind, Paul thought the world was going to end in his lifetime. And here we are, 2,000 years later. Hasn't happened. So if Paul was wrong about that, is it possible that Paul was wrong about a lot of other things? And even if there is value to the epistles, I'm a son of a progressive Methodist pastor who almost never used the epistles when he preached, because he didn't believe that they meant nearly as much as the teachings of Jesus. But even if you look at what's happening, Paul and who you are led to believe is Paul, is writing to churches that are struggling, that are trying to form, that are facing oppression, they have inner strife. And one of the things, because Paul thinks the world's going to end, is he says some things that are very problematic. And this is not defending Paul. It says things about slaves and masters, says things about that seem to pertain to LGBTQ people. But really, what he's talking about is, hey, everybody, lay low. It's all going to end soon. It doesn't matter. Just keep your worship quiet. Don't fight with each other. Don't make a scene for the larger authorities. And again, I don't know why this is hard for people to understand, but the word homosexuality is an anachronism. It does not fit the time or the understandings of the Bible. In a time when there are as many gay people then as there were now. Homosexuality was added to the Bible in 1946. And it was a grave translation error. And there are scholars that can explain why that is, why it's such a mischaracterization, better than I. And they are available. And again, I just don't care if that's what Paul said. Had to pause a little bit for some folks on the trail. That's the thing about paths. We never know who we're going to run into. And usually they turn out to be friends. So back to this idea of the teachings of Jesus. Those, although I'm not exclusively a Christian, and some would say I'm not a Christian, and that's okay. But what are important are the teachings of Jesus, the Beatitudes. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who are hurt. The kingdom of heaven will be theirs. The Jesus who talked about how you treat the least of these, what you do to the least of these, you do to me. The Jesus who sought out the outcasts. The Jesus who told a story about loving your neighbor that featured the outcast, the Good Samaritan. The people his audience, many reviled. The Jesus who challenged religious authorities, who said that love is the greatest commandment. Going back to Paul, though, if you read Acts and look at the story of who Paul was, he was someone who persecuted early Christians. He was not a nice man. But the story is a story of transformation. Jesus asks him, "Why do you persecute me?" He went from being a persecutor to being one of the biggest proponents of Jesus and of the early church. He had a name, Saul. That became his dead name. Just like many trans and non-binary people have dead names, their old names, he found a new name. This was about transformation. And thinking about other spiritualities I follow indigenous traditions and religions a great deal. Buddhism is also very important to me. And those things teach me that every single person is my relative and that I am connected to them. And that the suffering of others becomes my suffering. It becomes humanity's suffering. I have spent time in sacred spaces with non-binary people, LGBTQ, the entire community. I went to seminary with those people. And you know what? There was a wisdom that came from what is called queer theology that taught me a lot about the fact that I am never stuck with who I was. That I can grow in so many ways and I can change. And that's okay. And when I was taking seminary classes in particular, I was going through a time of change. And those people were the ones that helped me understand that I didn't have to stay stuck to what I was. That change was okay. That change was even hard, but possible. And you have to trust that process. God loves us as we are and as we are becoming. I believe that to my very core. Most importantly, I want to talk to people that are in this community. I know and love so many of you. And I know that you face so many struggles I will never fully understand as an ally. But I want you to know this. You are beautiful. You are worthy. You deserve the same dignity as everybody else, and that's what pride means. Not the other pride, the pride that goes through fall. No, this pride is talking about human dignity. You do not have to be one pole or the other. Allow yourself to become the person you are becoming, because in the end, that's what all of us have to do. And I believe that the divine, whatever you call God, isn't just some unchangeable, immovable thing. God is becoming with us. The universe is becoming with us. Nature is becoming with us. And I really want you to know that the world is so much better with you in it. And I say that as a person who has lost some dear friends. Don't let anyone tell you you aren't worthy. Don't let anyone tell you that you aren't the child of a creator who loves you. Anyone who is telling you that is sin, and that is wrong. You are beautiful. You are the path to beauty, the same path we are all on, even though it takes us to different places and different routes. So my friends, my siblings, my relatives, especially my LGBTQ friends, I already know you know this, but walk in beauty and peace, true peace that comes with justice. True peace be with you. The greatest commandment is love. It's love.